Zosia Kell had spent most of her life turning nothing into something. It was the first skill poverty teaches you, and it was the one she'd never managed to unlearn. Even after she got her accounting designation and a salary and a Presto card, she didn't have to reload with exact change. She was 29 years old, and she was working off a dead man's debt in the compound of Toronto's most influential crime figure, and the thing she thought about most, on the drive out to Etobicoke every morning, was what she was going to eat for dinner. Bogdan Kell had borrowed $80,000 from a Holt shell company in 2019. He needed it for a business venture that made sense only to him. Zosia had told him twice not to do it. He did it anyway. 3 years later, a stroke killed him in the middle of the night in a hospital bed in Mississauga, and the debt didn't die with him. The man named Garrett had explained the arrangement very politely. Meridian Property Group needed an in-house contract bookkeeper. The hours were long, the pay was honest, and the debt would be cleared in approximately 30 months. She could contest it in court if she preferred, but that would take 18 months and considerable legal fees, and Garrett could not guarantee the outcome. She took the arrangement. She kept her head down, her eyes on the columns of numbers, and she did not ask questions. Invisible, safe. But she was very good at numbers, and numbers told stories even when no one was talking. The capital expenditure files at Meridian told a story that had nothing to do with capital or expenditures, and the compound, this sprawling property with its security gates for a man who apparently lived alone, told its own story. About what Dorian Holt was, and what he controlled, and how far that control extended. She'd never met him. She'd seen him twice at a distance. He was taller than she'd expected. He moved like a man who knew exactly how much space he occupied in a room. What she'd heard, catching the end of conversations that stopped when she came near, overhearing staff talk in the corridor, was that he was ill, that he'd been ill for almost a year, that 3 chefs had left in 9 months, and the 4th was apparently tonight's problem, because she could hear him all the way down the hall, something in rapid French, getting louder, and then a crash that sounded like a pan, and then footsteps moving hard toward the exit. Zosia sat at the desk in the side office and waited for the noise to settle. Then she put down her pencil and picked up her empty coffee mug and went to find the kitchen. It was the kind of kitchen built for someone who had decided to do a thing properly and spent accordingly. Restaurant-grade everything, copper pots on iron racks, a center island the size of a dining table, stainless steel on every surface that mattered. The lights were on. The chef was not. What remained of his evening's ambitions were spread across the prep station. A partially seared rack of lamb, gone lukewarm, 3 different reduction sauces in silver saucepans, individual ramekins of something intricate and expensive, already cold. All of it was going in the bin. She could tell by the angle of abandonment. Zosia did not touch the lamb. She looked instead at what had been pushed to the side. The trim, the scraps, a bundle of wilted thyme, half a yellow onion with the dry skin starting to pull back at the edges. A bread heel on the cutting board, gone slightly hard. She found a small saucepan in the lower cabinet. She filled it at the tap. She dropped in the onion, 2 garlic cloves from the mesh bag by the spice rack, the thyme. Some of the lamb trim, just the fat and sinew, nothing of value to anyone with a Michelin star. Salt. She turned on the back burner, the one farthest from the entrance, and leaned against the counter. It wasn't cooking, it was chemistry, input, output. She was tired, it was past 9, and her body needed something warm. The smell came up immediately. Onion softening, garlic beginning to bloom, fat rendering into something that filled the kitchen air like a held breath released. It smelled like nothing fancy. It smelled like the kitchen on Keele Street where she'd grown up, on the days when her father had done the grocery run and come home with a whole chicken and the good crackers and nowhere else to be. She found a mug instead of a bowl. The bowls were up too high, and ladled the broth into it. She tore a corner off the stale bread heel and set both on the counter. She wrapped both hands around the ceramic. The kitchen door opened. She went very still. The man in the doorway was heavyset and unhurried. He had the kind of face that had made many difficult decisions and regretted few of them. He scanned the room, found her, and stopped. "I wasn't stealing," Zosia said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. She'd had practice being steady in rooms where that was necessary. "The lamb scraps were going in the garbage. I only used what was already finished." He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the mug on the counter. Steam still curling off the surface. His nostrils moved slightly. "What's in it?" he said. Not a question, a demand with the punctuation removed. "Onion, lamb trim, water and salt." He crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, picked up the mug, picked up the bread she'd torn, and turned around. "Wait," she said. "That was mine. That was just scraps." The door swung shut behind him. Zosia stood in the kitchen with her hands empty and the cold certainty that she had done something. She didn't yet have enough information to categorize. His name was Gerrit. She would learn this later. He had worked for Dorian Holt for 11 years, and he had never carried a mug of broth upstairs with his hands this careful. The way you carry something fragile that has surprised you by still being alive. He set it on the desk. He set the torn bread beside it. He said nothing. Holt looked at the mug for a long moment. It didn't look like anything his 3 chefs had produced. It didn't smell like money or effort or French technique. It smelled like something much older and smaller, like his grandmother's kitchen in Hamilton when the radiators were knocking and the windows were fogged, and the world outside was very cold and entirely harmless. He picked it up. He took a sip. He set it back down and waited. He'd learned in 8 months to wait after every sip, braced for his body to stage its revolt, the cramping, the vicious rejection that had made 3 skilled men take their knives and leave. Nothing came. He drank the rest. He ate the bread. He set the mug down and looked at it for a long time. "Who made this?" he said. "The contract accountant," Gerrit said. "Kell, she was working late on the Meridian files." Holt looked up. "Is she still here?" "She was when I came up." "Don't let her leave." Zosia had her coat on and both bags over one shoulder when Gerrit reappeared in the hallway. He didn't threaten. He simply stood between her and the exit and said quietly, "Mr. Holt would like a word." She thought about pointing out the limits of her employment arrangement. She decided not to. The study was dark wood and low light, and the smell of paper, and something more austere underneath. Holt was behind the desk. In person he was larger than she'd registered from a distance, broad-shouldered, sharp-featured, the kind of face you noticed, and then were careful not to keep noticing. But the frame was too thin for itself, like a structure that had been slowly emptied from the inside. The hollows under his eyes were the color of old bruises. He studied her the way she studied a set of books that wasn't adding up, methodically, without warmth. "You made the broth," he said. "I used the scraps that were going in the garbage." "I know. What's your name?" "Kell, Zosia Kell. I'm the contract bookkeeper for Meridian Prop." "I know what you are." He leaned back in his chair. "I've had 3 chefs since March, men with credentials I paid very well for. Every meal they've put in front of me has come back to the kitchen. Tonight is the first time I've finished anything in 4 months." She looked at him. He wasn't being dramatic. There was nothing theatrical in his voice. He meant exactly what he said. "I need you to make it again," he said, "tomorrow and every day after." "I'm not a chef." "No, that's exactly why it worked." He tilted his head slightly. "I don't need technique. I need something my body won't read as a threat. Whatever you made tonight, it didn't." She thought about this, about what a body had to go through to read every meal as a threat. "I'll need a separate contract," she said, "separate from the Meridian arrangement. Better pay." A pause, not hesitation. "Gerrit will draw it up. I set my own hours in the kitchen. Nobody comes in while I'm working, no exceptions." "Done." "I choose the groceries, my list, not a chef's list." He tilted his head again very slightly. He wasn't accustomed to terms. She could see that plainly in the way he went still, not angry, just recalibrating. "Done," he said. She looked at him, at the hollows beneath his eyes, at the careful, contained way he held himself, like a man who'd learned that even small movements could be expensive. "I'm not a miracle," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I can make simple food and I'm consistent. That's what I can honestly offer you." He looked at her steadily. "That's enough," he said, and something shifted in his voice. The command structure going out of it, leaving something that was almost just a man talking. "Start tomorrow, Kel." She picked up her bags. At the door, she stopped. "Thank you," he said before she could. Like the words were foreign currency he wasn't sure he had the exchange rate for yet. She walked out without answering, because she didn't know yet what the right answer was. Week 1, she made survival food. Oatmeal with brown butter and flaky salt. Soft-boiled eggs on plain toast, the yolk warm and just barely set. Broth every evening. She developed a version with a small piece of Parmesan rind dropped in near the end for depth. Plain rice cooked in chicken stock with nothing added but a bay leaf and thyme. A baked potato with real butter and nothing else. He kept it all down. On the 4th morning, she arrived at 7 to find him already at the kitchen island, settled on the tall stool at the end of the butcher block. He had his phone. He had papers spread in front of him. He didn't explain his presence or ask permission. He simply set his elbows on the wood and watched her work. She found this alarming for approximately 2 days. Then she found it something more complicated. He conducted his empire from that stool, spoke quietly into the phone, always quietly, always precise, answered whatever was placed in front of him with the same measured attention he gave everything else. He wasn't pleasant company, he wasn't trying to be, but he was present in a way that most people weren't, entirely and specifically, with nothing withheld. By the 2nd week, she noticed the hollows in his face were slightly less pronounced. His suits, which had hung slightly wrong when she'd first seen him up close, were beginning to fit differently, correctly. He said nothing about the food. He never asked her to change it or improve it. He ate whatever she made with a quiet reliability she found, unexpectedly, moving. On the 14th morning, he said, "The broth last night." She waited. The cheese, it made a difference. She turned back to the stove. "Parmesan rind, I knew it would." A pause. "How?" "Fat carries flavor, and the rind adds body without heaviness. Chemistry," she said. "I'm good at chemistry." She heard something from behind her. Not quite a laugh, but in the same neighborhood. 3 weeks in, she was dicing leeks when she said the thing she hadn't planned to say out loud. "Do you know what I think about?" she said, not looking up from the cutting board. "When I'm in here working and you're reading those files." Holt set his papers down. "Tell me." "I think about the Meridian accounts," she said. The knife fell in a steady rhythm. "The ones I've been moving around for months. The ones that are very clearly not property expenses but are recorded as though they are." She swept the leeks into the pot. "I think about what those numbers actually represent. And then I think about the fact that I'm standing here making sure you stay healthy enough to keep making those decisions." The kitchen was quiet, except for the gas flame. "You're not comfortable with what you do," Holt said. It wasn't an accusation. "I'm not comfortable with what I enable," she said. "There's a difference." She turned and looked at him directly. She'd been doing that for about a week now, since she'd decided that the effort of not looking at him was costing more than looking. "I balance your books, and I feed you, and when you're strong you go upstairs and make decisions that affect people who'll never know your name. I'm aware of that every single day." He held her gaze. "Why do you stay then?" "Because the alternative is worse," she said quietly. "For me, which makes me exactly as pragmatic as you are." She turned back to the stove. "I just wanted you to know that I see it clearly. I'm not doing this from ignorance." A long pause. "You're more honest than anyone I employ," he said. "I'm an accountant," she said. "We can't afford not to be." The warning came on a Thursday at the grocery store on Runnymede. She was weighing parsnips. She'd decided on a root vegetable stew, something slow-cooked and heavy, when a man in a grey raincoat stepped close enough that she could smell stale cigarettes. "Tell Holt," the man said, not looking at her, studying the carrots beside her with theatrical interest, "that calendar says accounts always settle." He was gone through the delivery exit before Garrett's 2 men by the entrance could process what had happened. They'd been watching the wrong direction. Zosia stood for a moment with the parsnips in her hands. Her heartbeat was very loud in her ears. She paid for the groceries. She got in the car. She did not speak. In the kitchen, she stared at the parsnips for 20 minutes. The root vegetable stew felt very far away. Holt came in at 4. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. "Kell," she told him, "precisely and in order the way you lay out a discrepancy in a financial report. No embellishment." He was very still while she spoke. When she finished, the room felt colder than the temperature could account for. "He used you to send the message," Holt said almost to himself, working through it. "He's been watching the patterns, tracking when you come and go." "Your men were watching the wrong direction," she said. He looked at her then, and something shifted in his face, not softened, exactly, but rearranged. He reached out and wrapped his hand briefly around her wrist. 1 moment only, checking something. Her pulse was racing, and he could feel it. "Nothing in this city touches you," he said. The flatness in his voice was not coldness. It was certainty. "That's not a comfort. That's a fact I will make true." He let go of her wrist. He picked up his phone. She learned who Calendar was later, the man who had engineered the poisoning 9 months ago, who had waited patiently for the damage to finish what the compound hadn't, who had watched Holt's slow resurrection with increasing alarm, and had eventually understood the source of it, and had decided to remove the source. She found this out after, because that same night the power went out. She was alone in the kitchen, the broth on low, when the industrial hum of the appliances died and the room dropped into absolute black. She went still. Her hand found the counter's edge. Holt appeared from somewhere she hadn't heard him come from. He pulled her down behind the island in a single motion, his arm across her back, bringing her to the floor. "Don't speak," he said directly into her ear. His voice was barely sound. She didn't. The service elevator, used for loading groceries in bulk, operating on a separate hydraulic line, made a sound it shouldn't. Someone had bypassed the main grid. The metal grate slid open. Footsteps followed. 2 sets, careful on the tile. She couldn't see. She could feel Holt beside her in the dark. The coiled stillness of him. A man counting angles, waiting for exactly the right moment. Something struck the stove. A burner knob turned accidentally. The pilot light caught residual gas and threw a weak, flickering blue across the room. Barely light. Just enough to read shapes from shadows. It was enough. What happened next was loud and short and terrible. She pressed herself to the base of the island, splinters raining into her hair where bullets found the cabinetry above. She kept her face down. She could hear Holt firing. Controlled, never desperate, and the heavy drop of a body on tile, and then a shout from the far end of the room, and then footsteps circling around toward her side of the island. Coming fast. She reached out blindly. Her hand found the handle of her cast-iron skillet on the lower rack, the one she'd brought from home, the one she'd used every morning for 3 weeks to make his eggs. She gripped it. The figure came around the corner. She swung from the floor, putting all her weight behind it, the same motion as hauling a full mop bucket at her first job, the same committed mechanics, and the iron connected with the man's leg at full force. He went down shrieking, his weapon skittering across the tile, and then Holt was there. And what followed was brief and absolute, and she pressed her forehead to her knees and did not look. Jarrett's men came through 20 minutes later. They cleared the room. They spoke in low voices. They left with purpose. The kitchen looked wrong under the generator's flat fluorescent light, bullet holes in the cabinet she used for dry goods, a copper pot on the floor dented past saving, her broth stone cold on the stove. Holt was at the island. His right hand was pressed to his left side, just below his collarbone. She could see the dark stain spreading through the fabric of his shirt. "Sit down," she said. He looked at her. "Please," she added, and the word worked in a way the command alone might not have. He sat. She found the first aid kit under the sink. Basic. But there. She dampened a clean cloth at the tap and brought it to him. She pressed it carefully to the wound. He looked at the wall across from him and breathed steadily through his nose while she worked, in the careful way of someone managing pain they refuse to announce. "It needs more than this," she said. "Your medic is on the way. This is just for now." He let her work without speaking. "You saved my life," he said finally, to the wall rather than to her. "I hit someone with a frying pan," she said. "You did the rest." Still, his jaw tightened. "I brought this into your kitchen. I told you nothing in the city would reach you. And I let them map your movements and use you as a courier. That's on me." "Calendar built the target," she said. "That's not the same thing as you building it." She stepped back and looked at him properly, in the harsh, flat light. The leanness that 3 weeks of her cooking had barely begun to address, the blood soaking into his shirt, the absolute control he was maintaining over his own pain. "I knew what I was walking into. I'm not saying that to let you off the hook. I'm saying it because it's true and I want it said clearly." He was quiet. "I need to tell you something," he said then, the same careful precision he brought to every transaction, but slower, like he was calculating the cost of something he didn't have the usual metrics for. "And I'm probably going to say it wrong." She waited. "I don't need a cook," he said. "I never did. 3 chefs proved that. What I needed was someone in this building who had every reason to lie to me and chose not to, who told me the accounts were fiction, who made me eat when I'd stopped seeing the point in bothering." He looked at his hands, then back at her. "I need you to stay, not as an employee." He paused. "Not because of the debt either. The debt was cleared 6 weeks ago. Jared handled it quietly. I should have told you." She stared at him. "6 weeks ago," she said. "Yes." "And you didn't say anything." "No," he said. "I didn't want you to leave." She sat with that for a long moment. Outside, she could hear Garrett's men on the gravel drive. Inside, the generator hummed and the ruined kitchen held itself very still. She stood up. She went to the pantry, the lower shelves untouched, miraculously, and came back with a loaf of bread and a jar of honey from a producer in Prince Edward County she'd picked up last week and brought in herself. She filled the kettle and set it to boil. She found 2 plain mugs. She sliced the bread, thick, uneven slices, the way her father had always cut it, without ceremony, and dropped them in the toaster. When they came up, she spread the honey slowly, watching it settle into the grain, darkening the surface. She set 1 slice in front of him. She poured the tea and set both mugs on the island. She sat across from him and wrapped both hands around her mug. Holt looked at the toast. He looked at her. He picked it up and took a bite. The honey ran to his fingers. He didn't seem to notice, or he noticed and decided not to care, which was something she'd never seen him do before. Let something be imprecise without correcting it. He ate the whole slice. She ate hers. They drank their tea in the bullet-riddled kitchen and didn't speak, because there was nothing left that needed saying in words. When her mug was empty, she carried both to the sink. She untied her apron and folded it over the back of his stool. 7 a.m., she said. He looked up. "I'll make eggs. Something with them." She picked up her bag. "Get the medic to look at that wound properly tonight. Kell." She stopped at the door. "I'll be here at 7, he said, quietly, the way you state a fact about the future you've decided to commit to out loud. She turned around and looked at him, at the honey on his fingers and the blood on his shirt, and the first honest thing she'd ever heard him volunteer. And she nodded once. "I know," she said. She walked out through the compound and into the dark Toronto streets, and drove home knowing, with the particular arithmetic certainty she trusted more than almost anything else, that this was not an ending. It was the opening balance of something neither of them had a ledger for yet.